And welcome back. Now, the construction industry is concerned that the construction mafia has now become a norm in the sector. The sector is of the view that government is not doing enough to deal with this matter and that it's disrupting businesses and ultimately raising the cost of projects. Now, criminal gangs have organized themselves into groups known as local business forums and they've invaded construction sites across the country in certain instances, demanding money or a stake in the development of these projects. Now, they've also repeatedly demanded money or 30% stake. To help us discuss this matter further, we joined now in studio by Executive Head of Economic Inclusion and Sustainability at Property Point, Clement Makotanyane. Thanks so much for coming through, Clement, and for engaging us on this particular matter.
Thank you very much, Sakina.
So yesterday there was an interesting story that we ran in the news around the construction mafia, where it seems as though some of the stakeholders in the sector are saying this thing has become so pervasive, it has reached the level where they feel the best way to deal with it is to actually factor the cost of paying the construction mafia into projects. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, thanks. I think it's quite a concern, but I think we need to take it just a step back to ask ourselves, what is a construction mafia? Construction mafia must not be mixed up with the legitimate needs of SMMEs in communities to participate in projects. As Property Point, we've been engaged in various or multiple projects across the country. I'm talking about projects in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Western Cape, in Pretoria. We're actually doing one project on behalf of our client now at Garangua. And what we see and what is more prevalent is SMMEs in these communities coming forward to these projects looking for opportunities. And it becomes critical for developers in these communities to demonstrate fair and equal opportunities for SMMEs in these communities. What we know and what has been standard practice is that developers or government institutions, they issue these multi-million construction projects to principal contractors. And then it becomes the prerogative of the principal contractor to appoint subcontractors in these communities. And as one would say, the business of business is maximizing profits. So then the principal contractors, naturally what they will do is they would naturally revert to people they're used to working with, in the exclusion of those SMMEs in these communities. And that's where the problem lies. Because
but there's a clear distinction, Clement, between members of the community who want to be included, rightfully so, when projects present opportunities where they live. There's a clear distinction between that and people, mafia, gangsters who come in and demand to be onboarded on these projects or just to be paid off a protection fee, as it were, in order for the project to proceed. And I think we're talking about the latter. We're not talking about community members who legitimately ask for jobs and opportunities on these sites. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the extortion part of this particular issue.
I think that, Sakina, that extortion part thrives in an environment where there are no systems and processes in place to showcase fair and equal opportunity for members of the community. Because a construction mafia hide behind the legitimate needs of the communities. Construction mafias, in typical, the modus operandi, they don't just go out and look. There are those isolated incidences, but the majority of the incidences is that in an environment where there's no fair and equal opportunity for members of the community, that's where the modus operandi of the construction mafia thrives. I've had the privilege of working around the country in multiple projects. I've also had the privilege of working with the Special Task Force of the South African Police Services that is dedicated to this project. It becomes very difficult for the Special Task Force to actually effect arrests if the mafia has infiltrated itself behind the communities. So as soon as you put systems and processes in place, and then you are able to isolate the criminal elements from the real communities. And then it becomes easier then for the Special Task Force, for the South African Police Services to be able to effect the arrest. But in the event that there are no systems and processes in place, there's no equal opportunity, you cannot demonstrate a process in terms of how subcontractors are appointed on the specific project. And then you have a thriving environment for the construction mafia phenomenon.
So how is this impacting the cost of infrastructure development in the country? Because if you look around the country, you can go to any town, you can literally walk down the road somewhere and you will see these incomplete structures. And ultimately, it is the taxpayer, once again, who will have to fork out for the completion of these particular efforts.
Look, one would argue that infrastructure is one of the biggest drivers of economic growth. And with delays in projects, you know, the costs are not only borne by the developers, you know, the costs are borne by the unemployed people on the streets. The costs are borne by the SMMEs in these communities. So it becomes critical for government and for private business as well to realize that let's not deal with the symptoms of the problem. Let's deal with the genesis. So in an environment where, because when I talk about fair and equal opportunity, I'm actually talking about economic inclusion and economic exclusion. When SMMEs are excluded, or communities are excluded from these projects, and then you start seeing that thriving environment of construction mafias, and as a result, consequently, then you've got projects that have been stopped and delayed, and ultimately a delay in economic growth.
But when the mafia enters the fray, the community remains excluded, because you will see they are the ones who benefit. It is their companies that will move to the fore to take up these subcontracting opportunities, etc. You look at some of the cases that they are dealing with in the Western Cape. There was a city official that was gunned down going on an inspection routine at one of the construction sites, and that is down to mafia activity.
Yeah, definitely. Look, one is not denying the existence of the mafia, but one can argue that when you put systems and processes in place, you would have dealt with about 80% of the problem. And the 20% that remains, and then it's up to law enforcement, and then you would have assisted greatly, actually. You would have assisted the Special Task Force of South African Police Services and so on and so forth to deal with the criminal aspect. Because I think what we have seen in the past now is the narrative that each and every SMME that walks into a construction project looking for opportunities is a mafia. And that's not the case.
It's not the case, but how do you discern?
The discerning spirit, let's have the discerning spirit. The discerning spirit is to enable access to fair and equal opportunities in communities. The community needs to know that how do I get access to an opportunity in project A? I go and register on the database. I'll get to be invited to submit proposals or quotations, you know, and then you've dealt with 80% of the problem. That information must go out there to the SMMEs in the community, to the would-be laborers that are interested in participating in this project. Then the modus operandi, like I said, Sakina, is that you're not empowering communities, you're a racist, and as a result, we are here to demand what is duly ours. People can't demand what is duly theirs if you have given what is due to them.
So what we've seen with communities is that when communities are disgruntled about projects in their area where they have not been considered or given due opportunity, they protest. You see it, it is clear, the community is up in arms. The issue is when there are hidden hands who don't come up as a community protest, as a disgruntled community, but people who would go and shoot people, who would take people hostage, who would demand exorbitant payment.
So again, the South Africans are good people. I still believe in the humanity of South Africans. The majority of South Africans are good people. In an event that opportunities are shared with them, they will be able to embrace those opportunities. I'm going to give you an example. about what happened during the riots. One of our clients, because at the core of what we do is to create a meaningful relationship on behalf of our clients with their stakeholder communities. Our drive is to ensure that communities have a sense of ownership in the operations of our clients. During the looting, most of the community members patrolled some of the shopping centers that belongs to our clients. So in an environment like that, had we not created that meaningful relationship between our clients' operations and these communities, some of our clients' properties would have been looted.
So in the construction sector, how do you define the community and community benefit when projects arise?
I think the benefit, it depends on the client really, but the word we like using is stakeholder communities. You know, if you look at King Code, the principles of good corporate governance, King is talking more about being stakeholder centric. And one of the key stakeholders is the community within which you do business. So the immediate community within which you do business is actually your major stakeholder.
But how is the community benefiting if one or two companies are the ones that are benefiting in the main?
That environment is created by a lack of fair and equal opportunity, lack of transparency. If the rest of the community is aware as to this is how we get access to opportunities, so those who are interested will go and participate. But if developers and property owners, you know, feel that they go for an environment where it's the survival of the fittest, so they approach certain individuals in communities who they feel that they are very influential and they'll be able to protect them in those communities.
Isn't that the problem?
That is the big problem.
Isn't that essentially aiding this whole notion and the behavior that we are decrying now? Because it leads to the next question of whether the industry as a whole is speaking in one voice. Because if you know there's a problem, why would you revert to that sort of tactic where you are approaching perhaps the people who are problematic in the instances where you have identified who might cause you problems in a community? Why isn't the industry united on this so that you can find, you know, some solutions?
Our role is to educate our clients, and the clients we're working with are actually benefiting from the expertise which we possess as an organization, as Property Point. That's why I've given you multiple examples about projects we undertake whereby we've got limited interruptions in relation to the construction mafia phenomenon. The challenges which we might face in projects which we engage with, this will be real community concerns about labor and about subcontracting opportunities, and those are being dealt with on the basis of fair and equal opportunity and transparency.
How many of the people that you deal with or have dealt with in the past have actually had their sites invaded and work stopped?
We had site stoppages in Pretoria, whereby the community needed to be involved in opportunities, and when we did the investigation, we realized that there were some few oaks behind who would have wanted to be paid. And we showcased to the community that, look, these are not your saviors. This project will give opportunities to you. These are the processes which you need to be followed. You need to be registered on a database. This is the local community participation plan, which the contractor has put forward. We are holding the contractor accountable to ensure that the objectives of the local community participation plan are actually being met. And then that's how we won over, and we were able to solve some of the challenges.
Well, we'll park it there. Thanks so much, Clement Makotanyane, Executive Head of Economic Inclusion and Sustainability at Property Point, talking to us about some of the efforts required to tackle the construction mafia and to make sure that things actually move as they should on these projects. Leanne, this is where we have to say goodbye. That's our time this morning.
Yeah, indeed it is. Thank you very much. Interesting discussion there on the construction mafias, and thanks so much as well for your contributions in this entire issue.